Financial planning simplified. I have folks here in the community ask me what that means, and the idea that we have here at HMFP is really trying to solidify and identify the core important aspects of financial planning. And when I think about financial planning, it is really just saying, okay, what are the things that I have that can help me in the future? What are the things that put me at risk? Identify them and start to stack them in an order that makes sense for me to pursue future goals. And that is our goal every single week, week in and week out. In many ways, we try to educate. I don't want these videos to be long. We tried to put a lot of information into 3 to 5 minutes, and I will continue a theme from last week. If you watched the video, I had this amazing pink balloon that I inflated and let the air out of. Ian Maddox, Hitchcock Maddox Financial Partners, connecting with you. And along those lines, I wanted to continue that conversation about inflation, but really just as one piece of an equation. And that equation is looking at the economy and the markets as a whole in light of where we've been over the last 18 to 24 months. Let me do a little historical backdrop. Mid to late 2019, we were under a different Washington, D.C. regime. Markets were fine. They were stable to expanding. But I know the conversations we were having with clients had to do with the fact that we were probably long in the tooth. In other words, what is truly driving this economically, market-based progression forward? And in many ways, if you look at history, we were cyclically, right, from a cycle standpoint, already delayed in a pullback, right? No one wants to predict a pullback. We'd all rather things just go up forever. We know that they don't. Things go up, things go down. That's just the nature of markets. That's the nature of economic cycles. So we get to the end of 2019. At that point, we all were starting to look down the lens, the barrel of COVID-19, and we get into early 2020. And that is a major curveball of historic proportion. And the government response, and I don't just mean the U.S., I mean all over the world, was to fill in the gap. I mentioned this last week, fill in the gap from an economic production standpoint. Now, we've gotten through that, trillions and trillions and trillions of U.S. equivalent dollars thrown into the marketplace to try to fill in the gap for what was taken away, right, by COVID. Now we're in the spring of 2021, and things are totally different, right? Is COVID gone? Nope. Is it completely behind us? Absolutely not. We're still learning every single day. What is different is that we have begun to release economies, right? We've begun to release controls. We've pulled those back and allowed things to breathe a little bit. And so now the natural dynamic, and I'm going to just speak to the U.S. here, the natural dynamic that exists is doing its own thing, right? CEOs, business owners, people shopping, getting out, doing things, entertaining, gathering. Now, there's lots of opinions of that. Some states are more restrictive than others, but generally speaking, I think there's this sense of a pressure relief valve that has been turned off, okay, or turned open rather. We're letting the steam off. The U.S. economy, for all of its warts, and I know there's lots of things we can point fingers at and complain about, is still very large, very dynamic, and very resilient. And we are seeing the result of that right now in real time. We're seeing markets continue to bounce back. We're seeing earnings from things like Apple and Facebook just the other day, just off the charts. And that's just representative because those are brands and those are companies we all recognize, but this is being repeated over and over again from small companies to big companies. The pressure valve has been released. Now, reality is, however, we have a new regime in Washington, D.C. We will have new policies, and I've mentioned this in the last couple of weeks in different ways. Those things are coming down the pike. We also still, as I was saying to clients 2 years ago, cyclically, okay, from a cyclical standpoint, we're still overdue for a more traditional economic pullback. Not COVID, not this black swan curveball event, but a more traditional just kind of contraction. You have the Fed talking about interest rates. You have the Fed talking about maybe pulling back. We are seeing inflation. I know I talked about it last week, especially in reference to particular commodities, parts and things that are hard to get for cars and bikes and lumber. Those are, again, just to reiterate, those are not a factor of trillions of dollars of stimulus, yet Those are still disruptions. But we do see inflation coming down the pike. So my comment, my suggestion, I don't try to pretend to have a crystal ball. I know some people do sometimes, but I do have the ability to say, okay, history as backdrop, here's the data we have in front of us. Let's interpret it and project it forward as best we can, right? As best we can, use the brain God has given us. I see things being positive. I see things, continuing to open up as, again, that pressure valve is opened further in a relaxing of COVID policy, that companies are going to continue to run and people are going to continue to gather and shop and go on vacations. How long does that last? I don't know. But it's something to be aware of, that it probably will run its course. You still have the fundamentals of economy. You still have accounting. All those things matter. And you still have the idea that you are probably going to see some different policy, whether it's taxes, whether it's rules on estates, whatever it is, things that could potentially be a dampening effect on the economy. How those play out and when they do, we don't know yet. But something to be aware of right now for the immediate future, things are dynamic and things are relatively positive. Until next time, if we can ever be of help, Ian Maddox, HMFP. Talk to you soon.